Alastair, your experiences in Alberta and beyond, just around the benefits of the market.
Sure. So there's a lot of information's been thrown at you. And with respect to the videoing of this, if I say something stupid, I want to edit it out.
Yeah?
Because I usually tend to poke the bear a lot, and Katie has told me off more than once about doing that, but I tend to be provocative. I tend to simplify things down in markets. What's the difference between a carbon market and a carbon tax? Every dollar spent on a carbon offset is a dollar the government doesn't get. And that's about as simple as you can get. And every dollar that a government doesn't get is a dollar that industry can invest in projects or technology that it chooses to invest in, ones that tend to benefit it directly or indirectly by creating offset projects, maybe in communities that they work within, or in First Nation territories that they work within. So there's many benefits to the markets. The other thing where I'm a little bit different on my perspective than Katie and Paul is that I always say I'm a policy taker, I'm not a policy maker. So as a business person who's in the business of generating carbon credits, I tend to invest in areas where I can see a return. The reason we had a $30 million carbon fund in Alberta as opposed to a $30 million carbon fund in BC is the returns in BC weren't worth investing in. So we chose to keep our money in Alberta, where we had clarity around, well, a reasonable amount of clarity around being able to generate a return in that market. What's been stated around policy risk or stroke of pen risk cannot be understated in any way whatsoever. There are two people at the table who are working on $100 million plus funds, only to have them disappear when Rob Ford was elected and he put a bullet into the Ontario cap and trade system. So $200 million of money waiting to invest in projects, whether it was in North America or abroad, disappeared because of that one particular action. So that underscores the issue around policy risk. I do a lot of traveling globally. I tend to follow Katie around and speak at a number of her events. And the outcome, or what I've learned through this, is that the experience that we've had in Canada is tremendously important to the rest of the world, particularly the experience that we've had in Alberta with the market that's been in place there and our ability to aggregate projects. So don't underestimate the experience that we have sitting around the table and sitting in other parts of the country, and how they can, and the lessons that can be learned from them here. To the point where Alberta has, or there's someone from Alberta who currently sits on the World Bank Advisory Committee for the operationalization of Article 6, and they're looking to that experience as to how to actually create robust market frameworks that can generate the outcomes that we want, but at a global level, at a really wide scale level. I think I'll leave it there. If you're going to tee me up for the provincial stuff later, unless you want me to get into those details.
I'll be teeing you up. I'll be teeing you up a lot.
Yeah, I think I'll just leave it there. The point is that, again, as an investor in my company, as we look to where we're expanding, although we started in Alberta, we've expanded into, you talk about the benefits, we've expanded into the States, we've expanded into Brazil, we're looking at Mexico, we're looking at Australia, we're looking at other jurisdictions. And it's kind of funny in a perverse way, but our office is currently on the 19th floor of Bell Canada Square in Calgary, and it used to be ConocoPhillips. So it's kind of odd to think that an environmental company in Alberta is now sitting where a large oil and gas company used to play, but it's a sign of the times, and it's a sign of what investment is coming into the space. And I don't think that we can underestimate the amount of money that's being set aside to invest in green projects around the world. And we have the opportunity to take advantage of that investment in Canada as long as we create a framework where that framework that allows that money to flow into it with a degree of confidence that they're going to get a return.
Spot on. Thank you so much, Alastair. So Alex, I'll actually turn it to you, co-facilitator, what you'd like to do now. I know we are a bit over the time segment for that. Time for any questions or?
Who's got a burning question? I'm really looking forward to hearing about the framework.
Digesting, just digesting? Okay.
We often
ahead.
hear about the fuel standard in California. Can you unpack that a bit too, Katie? How does that compare to what we have in Canada, or does it?
So,
How does that market work around the fuel standard?
so I can't, this, I'm not going to get into the details around the low carbon fuel standard in California because it is, it's a beast. It is quite opaque, it's quite complicated. I think what you need to look at for this type of discussion, both in BC but certainly in the federal government as it moves ahead with its clean fuel standard, right, which is a low carbon fuel standard, is the interplay between the LCFS and the carbon market, the carbon pricing program, right, where depending on how you design the low carbon fuel standard, it can, complement or not complement the carbon market and the actual, cap and trade system in that context. Yeah, I think I'll park the LCFS discussions for later, and maybe when Simon gets on the phone, who is deeply involved in the federal output-based pricing system, but also playing a big role in the national clean fuel standards development. They've been engaging with California quite a bit. And I don't know if Paul or others want to talk about the LCFS or other Oregon, BC fuel standard discussions.
Well, I'll say that those markets are almost can be characterized by the lack of transparency, the complexity, and therefore, to no one's surprise, the cost of carbon in those markets.
So it's over
almost an order of
200.
magnitude greater.
It's right now, it's over $200 US a ton. The California LCFS, yeah. It
Is
busted.
it a hybrid system? Would you call it a hybrid system?
Yeah, I would.
How would you call it a hybrid?
Because there are transactions that are enabled. There's a standard beyond which you can create, and there are linkages to the other markets that exist. Not hybrid in the sense of links to
No.
sort of carbon tax, but
Yeah, I mean, the carbon, it would be nice to have a lot more connectivity and alignment where the programs actually speak to each other in the actual carbon market and the LCFS market. And we don't see that right now, unfortunately. But you also see there's a lot of offset projects in the California market, right? California/Quebec market that are now looking at the LCFS market to go into and get credits from that market instead because the prices are so high, right? So this opportunity for lower cost compliance and the supply of these offsets in the carbon market, they actually are now being hijacked or more attracted to the LCFS market, right? But there aren't fungible credits currently across those programs right now. An LCF credit, you can't use that for cap and trade compliance.
One last question. Who's paying $200 a ton? Who is buying it?
In BC, it's $300.
large
And it's
fuel
Imperial
providers.
Oil and
Large fuel providers whose marginal cost is probably $500 a ton.
I might pipe in, and it's as sort of a carbon market geek and professional. I kind of think of the low carbon fuel standard credits and carbon offsets as they're kind of apples and oranges. They both are in a sense delineated in terms of carbon dioxide, but I'm not an expert in them. The low carbon fuel standard tons, really their primary delineation is in liters, is it not? Or like displacement of dirty fuels.
Yeah.
And so it's important to recognize that though they both are talking about carbon, it's important not to get them mixed up, because then you'll go down a road where you think, well, geez, we can get carbon out for $10 a ton instead of selling these as offsets from our forest project or from our fuel switch. Why don't we sell them as low carbon fuel standard tons? And you can't do that, and you will be made sad. So important to keep the two separate.
Yeah, not unlike in the renewable power side of things, a renewable energy credit is there. It's correlated to carbon, but it isn't
Yeah.
carbon. LCFS credits. Well said.
But the other point, though, is that what we're seeing around things like renewable energy is you might be able to create a REC, or you might be able to create an offset, depending on where you're operating. So in Alberta, we can create an offset, or we could create a REC. Which one are we gonna do depends on what our return is. And I think there's some areas where we may see this grayness at the lines between the LCFS or Clean Fuel Standard program and an offset program. And the other thing to bear in mind now is in Canada, we're now seeing companies from Europe come to Alberta to look for credits from a specific emission reduction methodology to buy them and use them in Europe, where the compliance cost is over 400 euros a ton. Right?
So,
now,
I mean,
so this is what I'm saying to you, that it's,
that's also
There's a lot of
that's a very new, it's a very, loosely understood, quite under the fuel quality directive with the EU, it's the upstream emission reduction market. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of hot stuff going on there that is of interest.
Germany.
all of Europe.
So again, there's lots happening in this space. Anything,
It's really, really simple, just follow, yeah.
Yeah.
it really is, Linda.
You spend 12 years in it, it's simple.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, we just kind of opened it up, we all looked inside and went,